Hi guys, Justice here. It's a quiet Sunday, rainy evening in Bozeman, Montana, and kind of concluding a fabulous bedhead weekend where I've been relaxing and attuning to my own internality and my womb space because that's something that I need to do regularly. And the topic I want to bring to you is about love, loneliness, longing, the spaces in between, connection, and how all of this actually makes us healthy in our relationships. So, as we come into this space together, I invite you just to take a breath, drop your shoulders, soften your belly, just be here in this moment. Mm. So, I think loneliness is particularly important to talk about in relation to love because love cannot replace loneliness. If we're looking to engage, experience, have the experience of partnership, even friendly, and even a friendship or like a romantic partnership, even a friendship, in order to assuage feelings of loneliness, then we're looking to use another person to act as a replacement for something inside of ourselves that no one else can replace. I think to a large degree in our seriously overstimulated world, we've come to think of loneliness as something that needs to be avoided, something that if we're in the experience of it too much or too long, we start questioning ourselves. We start questioning our self-worth. Is there something wrong with me? Do people not like me? Am I too much? Am I not enough? We look at the absence of activity in our life, or we look at the absence of having various people to engage with consistently, and we make the connection that those people aren't there because there's something wrong with us. Hi, Lori. How are you, love? So this is something I talk about a lot. This is, it's a false assumption, but it's trance thinking. And the idea that someone would disappear because there's something wrong with us is really indicative of what I like to talk about as being a regressive trance state. It's the child mind making an association about itself based on the behaviors of others in its reality or in its environment. So if you're looking around at the fact that there aren't a lot of people interacting with you right now, or you don't have a romantic partner, and the question that you fall back to is, oh God, like what's wrong with me? Please acknowledge in that moment that that is your inner child asking you for love and support, really plainly and simply. Because as adults, there's nothing wrong with spending time by ourselves. We have to spend time by ourselves in order to know who we are, to really know what we like and what turns us on mentally, emotionally, physically, intellectually, sexually even. We need time to ourselves to really cultivate our own internality and our own authentic energetic responses and desires without another person's input, so that when we do have the input of that other person, their input doesn't become the defining quality of our self-worth, because once that has been removed, which in some way, shape, or form it always will be, then we're left once again like struggling and scrabbling for self-worth. So loneliness is just, it's part of the human condition, and it is about embracing ourselves in the spaces in between activity, embracing ourself when we're stopped at a traffic light instead of reaching our phone, embracing ourself when we're when we're feeling uncomfortable and we want to like check out of that discomfort, and we want to, we want to, once again, we want to check our phone, we want to like lose ourselves in Netflix, whatever we want to do to avoid that discomfort, is us, wanting to avoid ourselves. It's wanting to avoid that loneliness, which is such a deep and necessary part of our human condition. And the only way that we can really truly be with another person is if we're okay with our own loneliness, because then we know that regardless of what that person chooses to do, we're going to be okay with ourselves, because we love and accept ourselves so deeply. And however that other person, partner, friend, neighbor, whatever, chooses to show up in our reality in relation to us, that can never either add to or take away from our self-worth. So I want to come back, because self-worth is once again, it's indicative of this childhood trance state. So I want to come back and just kind of embrace the notion of your own inherent worthiness, independent of anybody else, independent of what you do, what you create, what you produce. The childhood trance is to look at what's going on in the environment, going on in the world, and think, this is my fault. And that's because when you're that young, you don't understand people's internal motivations. You don't understand that they have internal worlds and needs and desires and traumas that are motivating them to behave in the way that they do, that it really doesn't have anything to do with you as a being. So, if you're a child and you have a parent who is largely absent, or you have a parent who is volatile, or you have a parent who even directly blames you and shames you, this is not because of you. This is not because there's something fundamentally wrong with you or that you've done anything wrong. It is really simply because they have this internal state that they are not skilled at holding and processing. But when you're young, you need to attach to them regardless of how skilled they are at communicating what's going on with them, or how destructive they are in their behavior or treatment to you. So what you'll do is you'll attach to them anyways. And very often you'll wind up leaving parts of yourself behind in order to show up and be who you perceive you need to be in order to be safe, in order to survive, in order to get whatever kind of attention or affection is available within that environment, within that system. And so that's what you do. So as a child, being left alone is devastating. It really is, because you don't have the skills to take care of yourself. And though you may be an inherently infinite, powerful being, even as a baby, you don't have access to the resources that you need to raise yourself. So you're totally dependent on this other person. So being left alone to cry it out in your crib, to learn how to self-soothe without another body being there, without having this really important neurological feedback given back to you from this more loving, supportive, mature system, it's devastating. And your nervous system, your psyche, your everything, it doesn't learn it doesn't learn how to self-soothe on its own. It needs feedback from the environment to teach you how to soothe. So as an adult, if you've been under these kind of situations, and I know there was like a whole generation where the belief was is just to let a baby cry it out, right? And then you wonder why these adults go on to be non-functioning, unable to bond, and sort of lacking in empathy and like human connection skills. We don't learn that skill in a vacuum. So if you're an adult and you're having a really hard time with loneliness, you're having a hard time with being by yourself, you're feeling like the absence of connection or partnership or relatable community in your life means there's something wrong with you, please, 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 please put that thought aside and practice kindness and gentleness and inclusivity with yourself, and really check in with your inner child. How old are you? Where is that feeling coming from? Because what tends to happen, and later when we meet someone and they're exciting to us and we start to connect and we start to attach and we start to bond, and maybe they're coming towards us, and then maybe because of their own reasons or timing or whatever, they start to move backwards, they start to pull away. We experience so often this state of like this fear and collapse and, oh God, like what am I doing wrong? And, these are all indicative of this childhood trance that we don't have the ability and capacity to be with our own loneliness, because the part in ourself that is screaming so loudly for care and attention and affection, oh, baby, oh, is young, is little, is really not meant to be dealing with life alone. And it's that part that becomes clingy and needy, or that winds up giving itself over to various forms of compromise, because it doesn't deeply and inherently understand and embrace its own self-worth, because that wasn't mirrored back to it at a crucial time when establishing rapport and positive regard with a primary caregiver let you know how deeply and immensely valuable and important you were. So instead of having your needs arise and move through you in a way where you yourself can meet them, and where it's okay to share and express them and expect to have them met by appropriate people, those needs become neediness. And then we get into that whole like, oh, but she's so needy and codependent, and it's like, and it's not your fault, because if you weren't properly bonded as a child, then you have probably developed some kind of different attachment style in order to deal with that. For me, I would definitely say I had kind of an anxious attachment style, and that I tend to be very open, I can be very, very vulnerable. People tend to share a lot with me. And then in that space which is an organic process of moving towards and moving away from each other, like breathing, in that space where someone's moving away from me, like all my anxiety of feeling like I've done something wrong for them to not want to be in that shared space with me or be in relationship with me, all that would kick up this anxiety and kind of to kick off this sort of hyper arousal pattern. And with other people, it's this ambivalent kind of attachment where it's like, well, maybe I need you, maybe I don't. And it's kind of comes from the same place, is it's not okay for me to really truly acknowledge and ask to have my basic needs met, or it's not okay to acknowledge and share and express my feelings. So that actual need, instead of being met, instead of being acknowledged and shared, it becomes this kind of form of neurosis instead. And then it's like, oh, I don't want to hang out with her, I don't want to hang out with him, it's too sticky, requires too much energy, it feels emotionally draining. And all of these come back to how we attach and how, whether or not we were shown when we were younger, how to soothe so that as adults, it's okay for us to be alone. Our worth isn't dependent on sharing space with another person all the time. So I believe most of us really want healthier relationships. We want to acknowledge that we need each other. We want to acknowledge that we want to connect with each other. And one of the things that actually really prevents us from doing that is the avoidance of our own loneliness, the need to use other people to fill in the spaces in ourself that are actually where we're longing to meet and hold ourselves more genuinely and authentically. And then, you know, the distress and the despair when they don't match being the person that we projected this need onto. And that can be really disappointing for everybody involved. So what's the answer? It's complicated and it's really simple. It's complicated in that we have to continue to acknowledge that people's responses are coming from their own internal access to resources and their own internal places of wounding and the way that those get projected outwards. And we have to continue to navigate within our own trauma, our own resources, our own awareness and skill sets, and to continue to acknowledge our self-worth independent of the way that anybody else treats us. And that can be tricky because, you know, we also need to practice safe and healthy boundaries. We need to be able to identify and acknowledge if someone in our life is abusive, because then, yeah, it's their internal world that's creating this distress for them, but it's also creating a distress for us, and we have the right to protect ourselves. And very often when we have a maladaptive attachment strategy, we have a hard time acknowledging our self-worth and our inherent our need for self-protection. Because if we're not willing to protect ourselves, then we leave ourselves open to engagement with others that don't acknowledge their own self-worth or that don't acknowledge ours. And they leave you, Laurie says, and they leave you when you ask for what you need and they don't want to do the work that you do. Yeah, that's not an uncommon thing. And I want to address that because I think that's a really common misconception in law of attraction work and some new age spiritual relational work. The work that you do on yourself is for your own benefit and your health and for you to be of benefit to the world. But that does not necessarily mean that's going to translate to other people wanting to match you in that state. What can happen is actually the opposite, is that any disparity that is already there becomes magnified, because as you move closer to your original wounds, which are also the repositories of your resources, it exacerbates the pain in others as they're close to you. And if they don't want to tend to that pain, there really isn't a whole lot that you can do to get them to take care of it. You can be as compassionate with them as possible, but that also means having boundaries and protecting yourself. So expressing a need to someone who can't hear it doesn't make it invalid. It just gives you information about that other person and where they are in their own journey and experience of their humanity, whether they can hear that or not, whether their heart hear heart, whether their heart is open enough to hear what you're saying, and whether they're, resourced, willing, and able enough to be able to respond. And then you are alone. So what is the point? The point is, what this comes back to is to learn how to really live and love yourself in that state of loneliness. Because if you have to change or suppress your authentic self to be in relationship with someone else, then is that really a true relationship? If you're using your own vitality and resources to keep yourself smaller, to keep yourself more manageable, to tamp down your needs, to snuff out your desires because this other person's heart isn't open enough to hear you, then is that really truly a mutual relationship in the first place? And some people can do that. Some people can. But what tends to happen as we choose our own aliveness more and more as our primary priority is that doing that to ourselves in exchange for what we perceive to be a connection becomes uncomfortable and unsustainable. Yeah. This path of personal accountability and really deep loving and moving through the world in an authentic way, and even belonging to a certain degree, will require that we navigate a certain amount of loneliness, really kind of a good bit of it. Because if we're using a lot of our energy to just do whatever needs to be done with ourselves to keep fitting in, then we're not really being genuine to ourselves. And what winds up happening is that there's a certain amount of energy that's required to wear those masks, to manufacture those masks and to keep them in place. And if we need that energy for our own creative endeavors, we need that energy for healing, and we look at the amount of resources that are available to us, and we look at what we're doing with those resources, and we begin to become really honest and genuine about what we want in our life, then we will come to the point organically where that type of compromise becomes unsustainable. And that is a space of deep loneliness, and there is no way to avoid that. There really truly isn't. There are people who can help you and support you through it, and I'm one of those people. This is one of the things that I help people do is to grieve what's been lost, what they've given up, what they've hidden away, what's been shut down or buried in themselves, and to retrieve that sense of organic innocence, which is what really truly allows us to love ourselves and others and the world in a way more genuine way. And I think the best panacea for loneliness, aside from just sitting with it, which can be difficult, but that's kind of what the point of mindfulness and meditation is. However you do that, the way I meditate might look different from you. There's walking meditation, there's sitting meditation, but it's just breathing and acknowledging, that you can tend to the sensations in your body. You can honor those sensations in your body. You can meet and care for and just be present with the sensations in your body. And at the same time, you can kind of, you can allow the story to sort of unravel and dissolve. And the stories are useful in that they provide context, and the stories are limiting in that they provide context. And if we keep sticking to the context of our stories and not tending and befriending our own internality and the sensations that are constantly with us, then yeah, it can become kind of a rabbit hole. Look at this. Dancing meditation, that's one of my favorites. This is one of my favorite forms of meditation. Look at his head on my foot. It's so cute. Oh my gosh. Would you believe if I told you that this is the same monster that breaks into my neighbor's houses at 4 in the morning? No, couldn't be. But maybe I'll fall asleep this well. Who knows? Oh my goodness. Yes, dancing meditation is beautiful. I think there's a lot of emphasis on connection when it comes to relating and making friendships and making partnerships. And there is less value and understanding put on the spaces in between. And that's where that loneliness can come up. That's where that longing can come up. And there is a certain amount of longing for human connection, but beyond that, into that, under that, deeper than that, there is our inherent longing for the numinous, which is the mystery, which is the essential, which is the place where our creativity is born, which is, it's where we make contact with the mystery. And that happens when we can be with our loneliness, because that's when we can hear our heart. So Sue Johnson's work, Love Sense. I am not, but now that you've popped it up there, I just might have to check it out. Thank you. And yeah, we need quiet, we need loneliness, and we need to cultivate a longing, not for something as a replacement for our loneliness, but a longing to be in contact with something that is both greater and that is essentially like the absolute simplicity of our very being. And that's when our heart opens. That's when we can hear our essential self. That's the space where we really truly get to know ourselves. And that is the foundation of intimacy, is self-gnosis. Because if you don't really truly know and love yourself, then your heart's not really open to you. And anyone that comes into your life that you want to open your heart for, it will really only be a temporary thing, because if they're the reason that you're opening your heart and you're not continuing to befriend and cultivate that state within you, with or without them, then that can become a burden for that person. And that can become a sense of stress and abandonment for you, instead of acknowledging, that you're going through that process really and truly, not only because you want to love another being with your whole heart and body and mind and soul, but also because truly, deeply, you want to love and extend that friendliness to yourself even more so, because you make a better friend to others when you're a better friend to yourself. Speaking of friends, let's see. Here's my friend. Say hi, Grom. Hi, Grommy. Hi, Grommy. Say hi to everybody. Hey. So, kind of some thoughts for you guys on this Sunday evening. The other thing that tends to happen when we can be with our loneliness is it opens us to our creativity. It's not easy to be genuinely creative with other people. I mean, you can create like shared creative spaces and all of that, but to really be able to deeply relax and tune into your heart, to listen to your own internal voice, the voice that is your internal healer and not just your internal critic. um, you need those spaces. You need that quiet time. You need loneliness. Um, with my own personal kind of anxious attachment style, I noticed how that affected my work. Like I could be really on when I was working for other people, but then when it came to tending to my own creativity and projects, like I just wouldn't have the energy. I wouldn't have the motivation, the structure, the direction, the dedication. And as I've healed this anxious attachment thing, as I've gotten a lot, cleaner around what I call my father wound, I've come to really love my own company and to be able to much more effectively sort of establish really like compassionate boundaries where it's okay to ask for what I need and to not give myself away in the process, to give what I can and have and am able to give in the process, and not give myself away at the same time, because I'm not expecting anybody to assuage my loneliness. And it's actually a commitment that I made to myself when I realized that allowing other people into my space, and it's hard because sometimes it's people that I enjoy their company. I enjoy time and space with them, and sometimes that's absolutely appropriate. But if it's me needing to be with my loneliness and they're sitting there in that space instead, then I'm actually allowing them into a space that that isn't meant for them. And so there's two consequences to that. There's the consequence that somebody else believes that now have they now have the right or the access to a space that's not really truly meant for them. And it means that I myself have not given myself permission to really fully claim and hold sacred that space. And so it's devaluing to both me and to this other person, because I didn't in that moment really truly value and deeply honor my own loneliness, which can give rise to creativity, which can give rise to relaxation, which can give rise to being the space between the patterns when you're coming unraveled and undoing, this old familiar way of going about life and doing things, and moving into this new way, this new state, getting really clear in yourself about who you are and what you want, what you desire, what you need, and what you want to engage in, and allowing for there to be enough space in your daily inner to outer activities to where that can actually show up from the outer world in a different way as well. And with that, I'll post a link down here. This is my most recent article on Elephant Journal. And it's kind of a summation of my healing with my own divine inner masculine, getting clear, getting clean, mending and stitching that wound closed. And it came about, this article, it really came about also because I've been working on my boundaries, and I've been giving myself permission to feel that state of loneliness. And it's so deeply human, and it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just means that It just means that you're human. So if it scares you, you can tune in, you can tend to your inner child, you can practice self-soothing yourself at different ages, because there's nothing wrong with experiencing a little loneliness as an adult, and there's nothing wrong with experiencing a little loneliness as a child, but it has to be balanced with knowing that there's somebody there who loves you and cares for you and wants to establish and offer you that positive regard. And as you get older, you absolutely have to be the one who's willing to do that for yourself, because if you're dependent on somebody else to do it for you, then the moment they go, you collapse back into that state of being afraid that you're not good enough, because here's this person that was providing you this resource and this sustenance and all this yummy stuff, and now boop, they're gone, and that's sad and that's distressing, and that leads to the kind of brokenheartedness that leads to, you know, collapsing in on ourselves and leads us to depression and leads us to questioning our self-worth, instead of leading to the kind of brokenheartedness that leads us to want to tend more deeply and honestly to ourselves, that wants us to be curious and compassionate and investigative, that actually leads to opening our heart even more, in the long run, because that's what a broken heart is. It's the stretching of our capacity to hold love for both ourselves and other beings, and that's really a truly beautiful thing. And being with our loneliness in that state is absolutely, it's really beautiful too. It's really beautiful, and it's necessary, and it's honest, and it's organic. As is this wine. So there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts. I feel like I've spent enough time with you for a Sunday evening, and I hope there's something useful for you guys in here. I think I attended to the comments as they popped up. It's nice to see you guys. Lori, Linda, Amy, Danae, Brian, Connie, hey, Sherry, hey. So if you don't have any further questions or comments, we'll just close this little engagement out with just taking a few deep breaths. Let's admire like the incredible coordination of my green here. Yeah, that's the thing. The pug snores in the background, the kitty purrs in my lap, and whatever yumminess is going on in your world right now, just pause and connect with your own sense of aliveness. With your breath, with your body. And thank you for joining me this evening. Much love to all of you guys. I'll talk to you soon.